it's pretty common knowledge that many of us know what to do, but we don't do what we know. In fact, I remember all the years that I was in sales and marketing at Verizon, GTE, IDARC, now it's DexYP. We would have sales trainers that would come in. We had some that were on staff, but from time to time, we'd have these outside sales trainers that would come in and work the sales psychology with sales reps. Even when I was at job.com, we actually had people that would fly across the country and come in and work with us one-on-one in our stations to improve our sales. I remember one of those particular guys that I was working with, and we would have a lot of conversation over lunch or coffee breaks, or after we'd finished the curriculum, so to speak, that we were working on. And I said, so what is the primary thing that you teach? Is it a process? Is it a method? Is it a way of thinking? What is it that you teach salespeople? He said, I really don't teach them anything. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, my job, for the most part, is to remind them of what they already know and to get them to do what they've already been trained to do. He said, for the most part, no matter what company I go into, the people in sales have already been trained to be great salespeople. They're just not doing what they know to do. I don't know if you would ever look at your day, your schedule, your process, your rituals, your routines, however you want to label them, and ask yourself the question, am I actually taking action on all the things that I know that I need to do? I just rewatched a nice video that I've seen. I don't know, it's probably been out there 2 or 3 years. Frank Kern, and I believe it was Jeff Walker who was with him. I may be mistaken on who his partner was. But they went to see Anthony Robbins, and they asked him, what's the real needle mover? What's the real difference when you look at people who are in the 1% category? And, there is some mathematical truth to the fact that 1% of the people in the world control 99% of the wealth. But it's not like it was predestined to be that way. It's not like the cards are stacked against the 99% and there's no chance they'll ever have that kind of wealth. That's not the way it is. It's that there's a mindset difference between those who have figured out how to make money and those who have only figured out how to have a job. And they're a little bit different, the way that they approach money, the way that they approach life, the way that they approach things. And for some people, that difference is anchored in their religious faith. And for some people, that difference is anchored in what they believe about themselves. But either way, it's anchored in belief. Now, how then do we marry the two together? If I know what to do, but I'm not doing it, and belief is really the key, how does that come together? And Tony Robbins draws this very simple 4-square, just a quadrant, and he said, if you have the potential and you take action, you're going to have results. But the results are not directly tied to your potential or your action as much as they're tied to your belief. So if you have all the potential in the world and you take some action, but you believe all along that action is eventually going to fail, or that you're not worthy of it, or that you're not good enough, or that you're not capable of, or that no one's going to support you, you won't take enough action, or you won't take the action you need to take long enough, or you'll find some way to sabotage the action that you're doing so that it will eventually prove that what you believed was right to begin with. I may have all the potential in the world, but if I took all the action in the world and I still failed, that would really, really just prove to the world how much of a failure I am, or that I don't deserve it, or that the deck is stacked against me, or that I'm from the wrong side of the tracks, have the wrong skin color, came from the wrong national origin, came from the wrong sexual orientation, came from the wrong belief system, came from the wrong church, came from the wrong, I get the wrong color eyes. We allow our actions to be tainted by what we believe, because our belief is what drives us to do what we do. From a Christian standpoint, the scripture says that a double-minded man should expect to receive nothing. because he's trying to focus on too many things at one time. And it's not just the action that you take based on the things that you're focused on, it's what do you actually believe? Do you believe that you deserve to be free? Do you believe that you deserve to be changing lives? Do you believe that you deserve to be impacting the world? Do you believe that you deserve to be debt-free? Do you believe that you deserve to have the house and the car of your dreams and raise your family in the place that you choose? Because if you don't believe those things to be true because of your past experiences, or you don't believe those things to be true because you don't see your own self-worth or your own identity as deserving, then the action you do take will be destructive and not build your future. Dr. Mark Sharona says it this way: you've got to reach the point where you're willing to admit, for better or for worse, the life you're living today is by your design. Think about that for a second. What you've visualized, what you've planned, what you've believed about yourself, what you've actually taken action on, those are the things that have built your life to where you are today. And if you stay on the same path, following the same patterns, following the same daily rituals, exercising the same amount of belief, and acting on the same type of things, you will have the same life 7 days, 7 weeks, 7 months, 7 years, 7 decades from today that you have today. Until you believe differently and visualize something other than what you have now, nothing's going to change. The government can't change it. Tax policies can't change it. Oh, they'll impact you. But if you notice those who are successful, and by successful I don't mean the amount of money they have in the bank, I mean the fact that they've mastered the ability to control their own lives, to manage their own routines, to believe that they can succeed, they're not at the behest of a new tax policy, a new healthcare plan. Those things don't impact them significantly. And if they do, they find a workaround. If it hits their bottom line and it impacts the amount of money that they're able to deposit or to spend or to give away, they make a change. They don't become victims of the system, no matter how jacked up the system gets. I mean, do you think Warren Buffett cares about the healthcare policy? No. He's shielded from that by the amount of wealth that he has been able to create for himself and the people that he cares about. And the same is true of Tony Robbins and many others like them. I'm not there yet. I'm still working on some of the things that I believe and the choice of the actions that I take. See, I'm like everybody else. I find myself doing, not everything that I know to do, but doing the things that I believe that I can be successful at, because I believe that I'm in my comfort zone. I believe I can do this without a whole lot of effort because it comes naturally, and so that's what I do. So as I was doing my own assessment for the end of the year and looking at where we are versus where we want to be versus where we're going next and what needs to change, one of the revelations that dawned on me, that probably should have dawned on me a while back, is that over the last 5 or 6 years, if I were to take my calendar time, you know, we've heard and I've talked about the difference between working on your business and working in your business. If I just took my calendar time over the last 5 or 6 years and said, what did you do with that time? Work-wise. Not talking about family and vacations and travel and that kind of stuff. I'm talking about in my business. What have I devoted my time to in my business? And I would have to say that somewhere between 75 and 80% of my time has been devoted to content creation. That's why there are close to 500 of these videos just like this. That's why there are, by the end of January, will be published and available on Amazon 6 different titles that I've spawned, if you will, that I've created, that I've written, that I've compiled, that I've studied and researched and practiced and rehearsed. And almost all of those titles, all of those books have been delivered in audio form, in video form, in front of an audience, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they've been written for different audiences, some for churches, some for government leaders, some for high school students, some for just this format here. But all of that content has been about 75 to 80% of my time. And there's a lot of content. At the same time, I've spent, I don't know, probably 12 to 20% of my time delivering that content. And I say that in a total of cumulative hours over the last 5 or 6 years, to include a year plus of these videos and time on stage and time in classrooms and time, writing and preparing and traveling around the world to teach the content. So 75 to 80% developing content, 12 to 20% delivering the content, which means there's only about 8 to 10% left to focus on sales. Now, when I was at Verizon, when I was at jobs.com, when I was at Faith and Family Magazine, when I was at Texas Homeschool Coalition Magazine, when I was at Winning Strategies, I was able to achieve 200, 300% of budget, or what they expected of my sales versus what I delivered in sales. When we took on the DJ business in 2005, by 2009, I was making more money on my part-time job than I was my full-time job, and I was still at Verizon making a pretty nice income. We didn't manage it the way we should have back then, 7, 8 years ago. We had a lot more expenses that we didn't need to have. We've trimmed that quite a bit. But my ability to sell hasn't changed. I believe in the content that I deliver, so my understanding of the quality of the content hasn't changed. But taking action on what I believe about my ability to sell myself, now that's a different thing. Why? Well, that's a good question. I have a couple of theories about it. One has to do with some of the religious experiences that I have in churches where people say, don't sell yourself, you've got to wait for God to promote you. Selling yourself is a bad thing, it's a sign of pride. Okay, but who pays the bills if that's the case? If I am the primary product in my business, do I not have an obligation to sell those things? I wrestle with that, I really do. So if you're a genius and you resolve that question of how does a believer in business sell their content, especially if their content has to do with helping people both inside and outside the church, as opposed to simply sitting back and waiting to be noticed for someone in the church to say, hey, you've got really good stuff, we'd love to use it. I really do wrestle with that. And I have mentors that help talk me down from the ledge, so to speak, and help encourage me to say, well, in this arena, you've got to move forward. And in this arena, you've got to wait. And I still struggle with that. So I'll be glad to hear your advice on that. If you have some legitimate experience in selling content into the churches that isn't seen as prideful or arrogant, but helpful. It's a challenge for me. But I also have a lot of content that has been used in prisons and used in government offices, used in large financial corporations, been used in public schools. And that content is very helpful to them. But even after I've successfully sold that program one time into a public school and one time into the government offices and one time into the PTAs, I just never made another follow-up phone call. Do you find yourself in that same place? It's not a critique. It's an honest evaluation. I look at myself and I say, what could I do better? I think you should be asking the same question. What could I do differently? What could I believe differently about my product, about my service, about my job, about my clientele that would move the needle, that would change things for my life? If the answer to that is you could pick up the phone and make more sales calls, what's stopping you? Is it a balance of time? Is it a commitment? Is it not doing the thing that you don't want to do? Brian Tracy called it eat that frog. Do the thing that you don't like to do first. Do the thing that scares you, that makes you nervous, that makes you gag. Do it first, get it over with, get it out of the way, and you can spend the rest of the day doing what you want to do. Dave Ramsey moves the same ideology into finance. He says, look, if you want to drive a nice car, save like nobody else. Don't go into debt. Don't finance it up front. Save like nobody else. So one day you can drive like nobody else. So one day you can live like nobody else. You got to have the gazelle mentality. I think that applies in your sales process. That applies in your financial management. It applies in your relationships. If you're not willing to run for your life at some point, if you're not willing to do what has to be done at some point, then what you're always going to have is the results that the rest of the world is going to hand you. Because whether they believe in you or not, most people are out for their own interests. So as we're wrapping up 2017 in the next few weeks, and we're looking ahead to 2018, if you did an assessment of how you spend your day, how you spend your weeks and your months, and you broke it down into percentages and said, I spend this amount of time working on my business versus working in my business, and this amount of time developing product or whatever it is that you do, could you look at that assessment and say, I think if I just changed the priority of the time, if I believed in myself and I applied that belief and my potential and took action. I have the belief in my product, but see, I need to move the action arena from mostly content creation, a tiny bit of content delivery, and a tinier bit of sales, to a lot more sales and a lot more content delivery, because I've got a lot of content created now. It's time to flip that. If I just turned that upside down, and I spent maybe 35% of my time in sales and 35% of my time in content delivery, then I'd still have 25 to 30% of my time left for content creation. But the income side would change significantly. Can you make the same assessment of your business, of your life, of your relationships, of your educational goals, the amount of time that you spend studying versus actually doing the work? Are you doing research or are you doing product development? Well, what balance of time commitment do you believe that if you change those things, you could move the needle? Do you believe in your own potential to do that? As we wrap up this year and get ready for the next one, I really want you to take some time and think about that. Begin to apply in your own life some new ideas that could really move the needle for you. Think about what you could do a little bit differently. And if you're having a hard time coming up with those questions, I'll be glad to coach you on it. They're the same questions that I'm going through on a regular basis. And I honestly believe that if you're working with any coach and they're not asking themselves the same questions, you should ask them why not. Get a coach in your life. Get somebody who's going to ask you the tough questions. Probably the ones that you've asked yourself in your head, but you found an excuse not to answer. If you really want to see 2018 be a different kind of year, insulated from many of the dramas of the world and of negative relationships, you're going to have to take some action, and it's going to have to be different than what you've done in the past. It's time to do something new. What is it? What do you need to do differently to have a better year in 2018? If you have an answer to that question, I'd love to see it in the comments. Shoot me some of your thoughts. I'm J Loren Norris, and you've been watching Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.